Hi, Joe Perry here. I recently did this seminar titled 4 Game Changers for Vibrant Health. And since that time, I've received a lot of requests for the information. Many of you have asked me to put it online so it can be shared with others. I'm doing that right now. And my hope is you will learn from these things yourself, use the knowledge to get healthier, and ultimately, maybe you'll share it with others. 4 game changers we're going to talk about can literally add years to your life and life to your years. Most of us want more energy, weight loss, improved immunity, better brain function, better moods, and better heart health. I commonly hear people say something like this. They say, Joe, I've done so-and-so, or I've taken these products for a long time, but it doesn't really seem to make much difference. So let's look at some things that can make a difference for once. I love innovation, especially when it results in something really cool coming together. And when it consists of things that might have been under your nose for quite some time, it even becomes more interesting. And sometimes it's dozens of years before point A and point B come together. Here are a few great examples that really came out of my desk drawer. First one was Post-it notes. I saw Post-it notes and I thought, when did these things originate? Where did they come from? Well, they were conceived in 1968. But they weren't introduced worldwide until 1980. And the new glue had been developed, but it wasn't sticky enough, so it was put aside until a man who was having trouble keeping a bookmark from falling out of his hymnal used the glue on the back of his bookmark. It stuck, but when he tore it out, it didn't tear out the page with it. As they say, the rest is history. Next thing is aspirin. I didn't know this, but aspirin was invented back in 1874. And it was a problem when they first developed it because it was too acidic. It burned the mouth and burned the stomach. Well, in 1915, almost 40 years later, they came in with a buffer that they added to the aspirin that took that acidic aspect away. And lo and behold, it worked, and we've seen it ever since. Third thing, superglue, another sticky item. Superglue was originally formulated back during World War II, about 1942, but it wasn't marketed until 1958, so that's 16 years? And they tried to originally make plastic gun sights and canopies using this formula, but it was way too sticky. So the product sat for more than 15 years before the current uses were discovered. And here's what these things have in common. Each of these incredible products was there for quite some time, but they needed to be looked at a little bit differently before they became a real game changer. In other words, they had to be approached a bit differently. And the 4 factors we're going to talk about today have also been right in front of us for quite some time. They've just needed a little different approach, a little extra spark that could cause some synergy. And when they're handled individually, each one can make a difference. But when you address all 4 areas, the health benefits can be pretty dramatic. I coined the acronym DISH, D-I-S-H, to help remember these cornerstones. Some time ago, I came up with a 4-letter acronym for what we're going to be talking about, these 4 very important points. And the acronym is D-I-S-H, or DISH. It truly is the acronym that can save your life. The D stands for digestion, the I for inflammation, the S for stress, and the H for hormones. Now, as with the Post-it notes, the aspirin, and the superglue, we've actually known about these things for a long time, as you probably well know. But, as I mentioned before, we need to look at them a little bit differently, and we need to deal with the cause rather than just the symptom. For example, here's what we've done for a long, long time. Got a digestive problem? Take an antacid or a super pill, purple pill. Got inflammation? Gosh, it's only common sense. Take an anti-inflammatory. Stress? Get a prescription. Hormone problems? Get a shot, get a pill, or maybe some cream. Sometimes we can actually aggravate the cause when we're trying to treat the symptom. Here's a good example. I have a real good friend who had some severe gastrointestinal problems, some severe pain, and all types of things were going on. And he went and had tests done. He found out there was ulcerations and inflammation in his stomach and colon. And they found out that the cause of this was anti-inflammatories. Now, it's kind of a catch-22. Anti-inflammatories have caused inflammation, just what they're trying to cure. Now, one very important thing to remember is these 4 things are very important by themselves, but are also intimately linked and synergistic when they're put together. And like links in a chain, they're only as good as the weakest link, so we have to look at them all. Let's talk about the D and the I, the digestion and the inflammation in this segment. And these are huge factors in your getting healthy, and I can't emphasize their importance enough. So let's look at digestion first. There's an old saying, you are what you eat. In reality, you are what you eat, digest, and assimilate. And let's look at a couple of big deals here when it comes to digestion. If we are what we eat, what are we eating? Is it even contributing to the building and the healing process, or is it actually tearing us down? For example, there are so many inflammatory foods on the market that we're subjected to. Things like dairy, soy, sodas, gluten, coffee. I even examined some medical meal replacements not long ago, and the propensity for them to cause digestive problems was huge. It's really scary. There are drugs like the opioid epidemic, birth control pills, and even anti-inflammatory drugs. Again, there's a certain irony there. You take an anti-inflammatory that inflames your gut. There's also chemical additives and residues, and this includes things like pesticides from their crops, their hormones put in our meats. There's things like glyphosate, which is Roundup that's used in our garden for killing weeds, that's used on genetically modified crops. Tongue twister there. Now, so 70% of our immune system is in our gut, and the gut has problems. What are the little immunity soldiers spending their energy and time on? So if you've got a virus or an allergy and your soldiers are all busy in your gut, they're not going to be able to do an efficient job at destroying or controlling the virus or the allergy because they're already busy. Another thing to remember is the gut is sometimes called the second brain. And there's for a lot of reasons it communicates with the brain, but it also produces things like neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, which these things affect your mood, your sleep, things like anxiety. So inflammation is a huge problem, especially as it migrates throughout the body. Now, we know that it's a huge problem because you look at these numbers. Gastrointestinal products are the fourth largest over-the-counter drug in the United States. They represent $20 billion in annual sales. And that's something that's huge to think about. So we really, really need to take that to heart. Inflammation. Okay, here's a big one that doctors are finally starting to recognize as being a huge problem with the medical community, with medical problems. Now, one thing to remember is it can begin in the guts. We've talked about these digestive issues and things like that, and it starts sometimes right there in your tummy. Now, it can also be silent, and what I mean by that is many times you don't feel it till it gets more advanced. For example, with digestion, a lot of times it will manifest itself as gas, bloating, and indigestion. So you have a patient, they'll say, I don't really feel anything. I don't have any problems. I've got a little gas and bloating and indigestion sometimes. Another area that's very, very common to occur is in the jaw, in the gums, in the teeth. And again, you don't really feel it until it gets more advanced. So it's what we call silent. Now, the effects of inflammation are far-reaching. They travel all over and cause all kinds of problems. Now, these problems can include digestive issues, heart disease, allergies, arthritis, immunity, and even brain function. And this is really important to remember when we get to thinking about our senior citizens, our parents, and such. Now, here's why. We have what I call an inflammation superhighway. It's really called the vagus nerve. Now, if you look at this poster, the upper left-hand corner is your brain and your brain stem, and extending down from that is your spinal cord. Now, the red and yellow line represent just one pathway that the vagus nerve goes along. So if you look at it, this particular line, one goes to the stomach, and one goes to the large intestine, another goes to the small intestine. Now, we've just talked about the amount of inflammation that occurs in those areas. So here you've got a highway that can travel from your gut all the way to your brain and to all these other important organs. So you can have a real problem if you've got an inflamed gut, especially, because it can cause all types of problems. It's very insidious. Okay, next we're going to look at putting all of this together, and this will create an incredible synergy when you get these four things working in harmony. Now again, the effects of digestion and inflammation alone are far-reaching, but each component of this DISH acronym is very important, and they work together to form a powerful combination. And putting them all together can change your life. So the next segment, we're going to talk about stress and hormones. So make sure to see part 2, and we'll ultimately get into talking about some things that you can do to really solve these problems and get healthier. So if you do have any questions or comments, feel free to email us at info@natratech.com. In the meantime, thanks for listening. See you soon.